Hey there, it's Sam. Just making a quick astrology update here. Right now, here on Tuesday, May, whatever it is, the Sun is opposite Saturn. Saturn-Sun opposition aspect, and it's two exalted planets aspecting each other. And when we get this opposition, it's like two forces sort of pulling on each other, and that those opposing forces tend to square off in some way or another. So as it relates to the Sun and Saturn, because they're not naturally friendly, it can feel like a real sort of tug of war going on a little bit with our sense of power and vision relative to our sense of boundaries and honoring the limitations of life. Saturn is where we face the limitations in all areas. So Saturn-Sun is where we see the limitations of our power, and we often experience that as a lack of confidence, as a lack of motivation, even a lack of digestive fire. For instance, Saturn-Moon is where we feel the limitations of our love and heart and family and connections. Saturn-Mercury is the limitations of our information and intellect and communication. I'm not going to go through each one, but that's what we experience. And the limitations of Saturn are to connect us to something that's unlimited. And usually we do that through some form of solitude, because we wind up losing confidence or wind up feeling, sort of not trusting ourselves a little bit and whatever he's influencing. So this is a general concept in natal charts as well as when you get transits or whatever. So we could all be feeling this challenge of confidence measured against limitation and being realistic and practical, because this is why Saturn shows the limits. And it's not just limits that are bad, it's the healthy limits, the healthy boundaries, the healthy realization that nothing external is the ultimate thing. We only have a limited amount of time, we only have a limited amount of worldly power. And again, I'm saying externally. Internally, it's infinite, but externally, it's not. This is why the greatness of Saturn is that it compels us to be introspective. But the way we need to be introspective is through solitude. And again, that's the great Saturn gift. If someone can exist in solitude and not have to be constantly looking for the outer world to be the solution, then Saturn is not so difficult. So this is a great opportunity for increased solitude and introspection with the Saturn-Sun opposition. Saturn tends to separate us from others. That's why he's exalted in Libra. But in another sense, he tends to connect us with others in our moments of stress and difficulty because of the exaltation point in Libra. So there's always that sort of opposition, that opposing point. So the thing that you might be experiencing now, and it's the actual aspect culminates on May 10th. That's when it becomes exact. But you might be experiencing this real desire and drive to be all that you can be, and yet at the same time, this kind of lack of confidence, this lack of energy, this lack of vitality. And it's tough because the Sun is exalted right now in Aries. So we're feeling his energy really strong and a lot of enthusiasm, but then opposed by Saturn and Libra is saying, but don't be stupid, don't be foolish, but you've made these mistakes before, you got to be careful. And that's harmonizing the enthusiasm of the Sun. So I've talked about this a lot in recent forecasts when I mention the eclipses and everything else. I've mentioned, when I talk about especially the recent solar eclipse, that it's an exalted Sun and it's opposed by an exalted Saturn. So all these exalted placements are culminating now between now and May 10th, when the Sun and Saturn directly oppose each other. And the opposition is an aspect of, it's a very strong dialectic where there's a lot of dialogue going on between those two planets, and especially, this is why you see oppositions in romantic relationships and in relationships with others where there are equals. Then the opposition is very helpful because people can work things out. They can work through the problem of the opposition. So you might be experiencing some of this in your relationships or in other situations where you have to work through your level of confidence and another person's prohibitive influence, or some other situation like that might be up for you. Or there might be a situation where you have to curb your enthusiasm and be more realistic and honor boundaries and structure or money or something else that is holding you back. This is another way that Saturn really holds back our enthusiasm. And this is a pretty typical one, and it can really turn into an excuse. We have a lot of excuses for why we don't live full, empowered. And a lot of time the excuses are money and connections, and if I only had more money, then I would do this thing. Or if I could only get, I didn't have any breaks, I was oppressed by my parents or my past or whatever. This is why I'm not acting and sharing my light. This is why I'm not being the sun. Because of all the Saturn stuff, I'm not being the sun. Typically, it becomes things like money and resources. But again, those are just excuses, because where there's a will, there's a way. And Saturn-Sun opposition, in bringing together these two seemingly opposed forces, in fact, brings about a great humility, which is definitely possible with both of them exalted. And that humility takes the focus off of ourself and our story, our failing story, or our story of failure, our failing success story, and all those excuses, and it puts the issue on what we want to contribute, puts the issue on what's going to drive our higher growth anyway. And that is the desire to contribute, the desire to really spread that true power that's within us. That has to be the driving force. If that's not the driving force, then no amount of money is going to matter. Someone could give you all that money, and if you didn't have the focus, which is what the sun brings, that focus, then you would just disperse the money in all the ways you're dispersing it now. Just, in a more magnified way. So Saturn-Sun opposition can get you really serious about the truth of all of these issues. Can really bring it, into the realm of truth, so that you can kind of step back from all of the drama of this recent eclipse and step into that, because we're also going to have the moon going through, Cancer and Leo and then Virgo. So especially as it goes through Cancer and Leo, it's a time to be more empowered, because Leo is ruled by the sun and the sign of that power. So I hope this was helpful, and you have a good time between now and that full Sun-Saturn opposition.